Imagine for a moment you had a power cut right now. I very much suspect that you would find it hard to carry on working. Yet we take electricity for granted, don't we? It's so ubiquitous that essentially it's invisible. Yet when electricity first came along, organisations were unsure what to do with it. They actually appointed chief electricity officers to help them integrate it into their business. Yet despite this, a decade after the introduction of electricity, factories were still being built beside the river, even though there was no longer a need for the power that the water provided. The potential of electricity still hadn't sunk in. And time and again throughout history, we have underestimated the power of technology to fundamentally change our world. The arrival of the printing press didn't just allow us to print books. It increased literacy, improved education, and undermined the Catholic Church. That's not bad for a bit of tech. The introduction of the production line caused a massive exodus of people away from the country into city centres, while a few years later the automobile came along and everybody moved out to the suburbs. These technologies had far-reaching effects way beyond their original use. And so it is with digital. Many consider digital to be just a collection of technologies, but it's far more important than that. Digital has changed everything, and many organisations, including those in the legal sector, are failing to grasp the enormity of what's happening around them. For a start, digital has fundamentally changed our behaviour, even to the extent of rewiring our brains. Just think for a moment what the first thing you do is when you wake up in the morning. My guess is that, like the vast majority of people, you reach out and grab your mobile phone. Our entire waking lives were permanently connected to our colleagues, our friends, and news stories. In fact, the whole of human knowledge probably sits in your pocket right now. Digital technologies have changed decision making too. They've changed how we express ourselves and our expectations. We expect outstanding customer service, and we're quick to express our dissatisfaction online if we don't receive it. We look to the web for recommendations and are no longer constrained by geography or our personal network. This has caused a real shift in power. Where once organisations had all the budget that allowed them to have their voice heard, now the power lies in the hands of every individual, because every person can express their opinions and have an audience. Every organisation is just one disgruntled customer away from a PR disaster. Sector after sector has been fundamentally reshaped by this digital revolution. Customers, for example, have chosen to download individual songs instantly rather than go to the high street and purchase an whole album. And that's destroyed the high street retail music sector virtually overnight. Blockbusters were quickly supplanted by Netflix as users chose the convenience of streaming over returning a physical disc. And Kodak was too slow to adapt to the emergence of digital photography, and they had to close their doors. Now we're seeing taxis around the world living in fear that Uber is going to come to their city, because Uber can offer a more streamlined experience. Only recently we saw another casualty here in the UK of the newspaper industry being disrupted by digital when the Independent stopped publishing. Meanwhile, the more digitally savvy Guardian is prospering in this new digital age. But it's not just the business to consumer sector that's been affected. In fact, it's hard to think of a sector that hasn't been impacted by the changing consumer behaviours that have been brought around by the digital revolution. From business telecoms to travel, organisations are using digital to make better purchasing decisions. Equally, digital is providing a competitive advantage for those companies who are grasping it and allowing efficiencies that were previously impossible. But it isn't just changing how we do business, it's also changing our workplace too. There's a new generation of digitally savvy employees who have very different expectations of the workplace. A generation comfortable with blurring the lines between home and work. A generation used to always being online and always being available. Now that sounds great, but this generation also has very different expectations of their employers. Influenced by online collaborative working and open source projects, they expect a level of autonomy and freedom not previously offered. They expect control over where and when they can work, and a large degree of freedom when it comes to what it is that they actually do. They also expect access to the best digital tools to enable them to do their job efficiently. You'll find that they have very low opinions of organisations who don't invest in their digital systems. This is a generation that doesn't just value salary, they also value having a good working environment. In fact, they value it just as highly. When looking at something like the legal profession, it would be very tempting to think that they're largely immune to this kind of digital disruption, especially in comparison to other sectors. But that's not the case. Legal firms are facing the same kind of digital disruption as everyone else. But you wouldn't necessarily think that from the way these digital companies are behaving. Sure, they've introduced some digital technology into their operation, but little has fundamentally changed in the way that they do business on a day-to-day basis. But like so many other sectors, the legal sector is ripe for this kind of digital disruption. There are many opportunities for digital to bring about real improvements within the sector, yet senior management are oblivious to some of the seismic changes that are going on around them. Changes such as the increasing way that trials are being influenced by the clever use of digital tools such as social media, how individuals or small pressure groups with no budget whatsoever can draw attention to their issues and pressure organisations in unprecedented ways. But even within law firms themselves, digital is beginning to have a serious impact. In fact, there are 4 areas that particularly concern me and that I want to explore over the next few minutes. The first area that law firms need to be aware of is that the way that people are selecting a law firm is changing. Traditionally, the selection of a law firm has been highly influenced by geography. You select a law firm that's local to your area, but that's increasingly becoming a secondary consideration. Today, people are using digital tools to find and evaluate your competitors no matter where they are geographically. You're no longer being compared to law firms just in your city, you're also being compared to those across the country and in some situations even abroad. We now live in a world where your customers are looking for the best law firm to do the job, not the closest. This means that as law firms, we need to be able to demonstrate a real deep specialism, a deep knowledge in a specific area, because increasingly that's going to be the deciding factor amongst our customers about whether they hire us or not, and we need to adapt to that new reality. Now, you might be thinking that that doesn't apply in your particular case because the majority of work your law firm wins is through personal networks of your individual attorneys. But that is the second area that is changing quite significantly. Much of the work done by law firms has traditionally been done through the network of contacts held by those individual attorneys. I believe actually this is one area that digital isn't going to significantly impact. After all, people always like to buy from people, and this is especially true when you're talking about something that requires a high degree of trust between the client and the lawyer that the client is hiring. But how an individual attorney maintains that network of contacts is being changed by digital. Many of the stereotypes of attorneys whining and dining clients or playing golf aren't actually that far off the mark. And this method of networking, although effective and extremely important, does have its limitations. For a start, attorneys can only maintain so many relationships in this way, at least without becoming morbidly obese from too many lunchtime meetings. Also, there's a geographic constraint at play here. The attorney can only interact with so many people within a limited area. But digital enables a much larger level of interaction. In effect, the attorney can go from managing a relatively small network of a few dozen or possibly 100, 150 people to being able to interact with thousands of people online. This is something that the younger generation of attorneys is all too aware of. They're quick to embrace social networks like LinkedIn, and they've got a desire to use things like email marketing or blogging to build their reputation. Unfortunately, many law firms are slow at accommodating this kind of new way of networking. But those new communication tools are not only great for allowing attorneys to expand their network, they also have the potential to improve the customer experience, and that's the next point I wanted to raise. After all, the legal sector involves a large degree of back and forth communication that can be highly complex and hard to track. The potential of implementing tools to help manage this communication is huge. This is an opportunity to streamline your processes so that the customer has a much better experience. And a better experience will create customer loyalty and encourage recommendations, because we know time and time again it's been proved that people are actually willing to pay slightly more for a superior experience and one that saves them time, and they're certainly much more likely to recommend it to others. But it's not just about saving the user's time. Better digital communication tools, such as, say, a client dashboard, can also help keep the client informed about the state of their engagement with you. This helps to reassure the customer that things are in hand, while at the same time reducing your overheads of communicating with them. Reducing overheads touches on another big area that digital can help with in the legal sector, and that's efficiency. The legal sector involves a large amount of highly complex and detailed work. It involves a lot of research that can be time consuming, and there's large amounts of documentation and compliance involved. Areas that take considerable effort. Anything that can be done to reduce the burden of these areas will significantly improve the efficiency of law firms, and this in turn will increase your profitability and allow your law firm to compete more aggressively on pricing. Either way, whether you go down the increased profitability or cut your prices, is good for business. Digital offers so much potential in this area. Applications that can help with the research processes, as well as manage the large amounts of documentation. There are even possibilities of automating some of the compliance issues involved in legal proceedings. Now, I'm far from an expert in the legal sector, but even a cursory look as an outsider shows me that there's lots of potential for digital to reduce costs, increase profitability, and expand reach. Those who pursue this path aggressively are going to gain a significant competitive advantage and potentially disrupt the sector. But that isn't going to happen without overcoming some significant barriers. By looking at digital disruption in other sectors, I've come to notice a disturbing trend. In many cases, it's a new startup or an outside player that disrupts the sector. For example, Apple disrupted high street retail sales of music. Netflix started up and has changed the way we consume TV. Uber is a new player in the world of taxis. I could go on, but all of these are either an outsider or a startup, somebody who can think differently about the situation. This is because it's very hard to change. If organisations have been doing something for decades, it's hard for them to recognise that that approach no longer works or that there's new opportunities to do things better. We fall into patterns of behaviour that we struggle to deviate from even when circumstances change around us. This is why the legal sector is so ripe for disruption. They've largely been doing things the same way for years and years, even though the world has changed around them. If your company is going to avoid someone coming in from the outside and disrupting how things are done within the sector, you need to become significantly more agile and overcome some significant barriers that exist within your organisation. Barriers that prevent you from adopting digital best practice. Barriers like your own management team. The sad truth is that many senior management teams in law firms are a significant barrier to digital adoption. For fear of making sweeping generalisations, the average age of a senior partner means that they're not particularly digitally savvy. Unlike a growing number of their customers and their employees, they're not necessarily using digital tools on a daily basis. And as a result, they don't value digital particularly highly. There's a general unwillingness to accept that things have changed, and so it falls to us who are aware of that need to create a compelling business case to persuade them. A business case that focuses on the benefits of digital in areas that they understand, areas that they know, areas such as profit, efficiency, and reputation. We can't expect senior management to care about the need for a new customer relationship management system, but they will care if you talk about how that customer relationship management system can save them money or can increase the number of customers who recommend them to colleagues. Instead of trying to convince management of the importance of digital, we should instead frame the conversation around the pain points that senior management are struggling with. Every senior management team have certain objectives that they want to reach or barriers that they want to overcome, and the chances are that digital will be able to help them to get into the position of overcoming those barriers or dealing with those objectives. But it's not just senior management who don't fully understand digital, it's not even our own colleagues. We ourselves have quite a narrow view of digital. I strongly believe that one of the biggest barriers to digital success is our own view of digital. Our own career background often gives us a somewhat blinkered view of the role that digital should play within our organisation. For example, if you come from a technology background, we tend to focus on the systems and applications that can help our business operate. While if our expertise is in marketing, we tend to perceive digital as a marketing and communication tool. But in truth, digital affects every part of our organisation. Digital can improve company-wide productivity, help recruitment, support customer service functions, streamline invoicing, improve the kind of services we can deliver, and operate as an effective research tool. However, to do all of that, digital transformation needs to affect every part of the business, not just marketing and IT. It impacts how we measure compliance all the way through to how we procure new products and services. Nothing in our business should remain untouched. Without a doubt, digital offers the potential to revolutionize how we do business. But one of the biggest barriers we face is how we choose to invest in its application. Within the vast majority of organisations I work with, digital is seen as a capital expense. It's treated very much like any other procurement project that happens intermittently. But in truth, we should be considering it an operational expense because it's an ongoing investment. Implementing a new digital service is not like constructing a new building. It's not simply a matter of drawing up plans, implementing those plans, and then the building is complete and we just do some minor maintenance. When we build a new digital service, it's more like planting a garden. The initial garden is very sparse and pretty basic, but as it grows, we prune, trim, and add additional plants, and in time the garden matures and flourishes. This is the approach that we need to take with digital services. Instead of investing large quantities of money every few years in redesigning a digital service, we should be launching a minimal viable product, monitoring its effectiveness and improving it over time. Unfortunately, this is often problematic because there are predefined budgets that have to be spent on specific arbitrary deadlines. The result is that once launched, most digital services are largely abandoned except for a small amount of maintenance, so it's hardly surprising that we have to repeat the process again every few years. With some significant challenges to overcome, and yet so much potential available, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the job that needs doing. The question therefore arises, how do we stop treating digital as a series of technology projects and start allowing it to transform the way we operate as an organisation? And that is a big question and far exceeds the little time I've got left. In fact, it's a topic I wrote an entire book on and I still barely touched the surface. However, as I wrap up today, I want to leave you with 3 areas that I think are particularly crucial. The first is the need to be much more focused in our approach to digital. In the vast majority of organisations, digital still is managed on a fairly ad hoc basis. There's no clear process for defining the priorities of new digital services and no clear leadership with responsibility for digital spread across multiple departments, and there's no clear vision of what impact digital could have on the organisation in the long term. As a bare minimum, our organisations need one individual responsible for the integration of digital into the company, supported by an understanding executive sponsor. That person should not just have the responsibility for digital, but have the authority to implement changes within the organisation to ensure it's more digitally friendly. Second, the organisation needs a clear vision for its eventual goal of integrating digital and a strategy for moving towards that objective. And this needs to be a lot more than a set of woolly goals, but instead a clear vision of how everyone across the organisation can be using digital on a day-to-day basis. But having a clear vision and one person to ensure that is implemented is not going to be enough. As digital becomes business critical, a business critical component in how our organisation operates, we can't continue to rely on outside contractors to build new digital services for us. Doing so is only going to perpetuate that periodic project-based thinking I was talking about earlier. Instead, if we want to be constantly improving our digital services, we need to start implementing new ones and adjusting the ones we have based on feedback from our customers and changing business requirements. And to do that, we're going to need an in-house digital team. A team that needs to be capable of doing a lot more than the occasional piece of maintenance. I know many organisations that claim to have an in-house digital team, but they're often significantly under-resourced and lack the time to think strategically, to develop new services, and to keep their skills up to date. Finally, it's time to start rethinking our standard operating procedures. The world has radically changed and we need to create a digitally friendly framework within which our company can now operate. This will involve everyone in the company re-evaluating the way that they work. People will need to ask themselves whether digital can help them do their job more efficiently or even revolutionize their job entirely. But we will also need to consider entirely new working practices for how we're going to deal with the digital services that we're creating. Policies around addressing issues such as accessibility, data privacy, and other compliance issues. But beyond that, we also need to establish new working practices for how the organisation is going to deal with things like writing for the web or its use of social media. Now, I'm well aware that the task ahead of us is a huge one. I'm suggesting that you can't simply bolt digital onto the side of existing business models, that instead we need to transform the very nature of the way we operate. And that's, I know, asking you to challenge the status quo and work hard to initiate a program of disruption across your entire organisation. And that is overwhelming. But we can't expect this kind of change to happen naturally. And it's not even going to be something that comes from senior management initially. So who's going to initiate this kind of thing if not us? We also need to remember the consequences here of inaction. Digital has an incredible capability to provide a massive competitive advantage and completely redefine the sector. It's not a matter of whether we should be doing digital disruption or not. It's simply a matter of whether we adapt quickly enough to survive the inevitable oncoming storm. When I wrote my book on this subject, I chose to call it digital adaptation. And I picked the word adaptation because it reminded me of a quote from Charles Darwin, a quote that I think perfectly sums up the current predicament we find ourselves in as we weather the storm of digital disruption. The quote is, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change." The question is, can your organisation adapt? Thanks for listening and good luck.